Clowns. Are they funny, amusing, frivolous, scary, uncanny, ambiguous, or unpredictable? Whether you grew up afraid of them or not, we may all agree upon the fact that they were truly never up to any good. As cultural artifacts, clowns have always had an unnatural and sinister ambiguity. From laughing at your own expense to being put into horror films, they have caused us some type of trauma, from youth to even the adult audiences surrounding them. From being a king's entertainment in the 18th and 19th centuries to children's birthday parties, clowns were designed to charm us rather than discomfort us. Despite being connected with the reputation of being something innocuous and childish, famous writers such as Edgar Allan Poe and later Stephen King were able to put a dark twist to the thing that was once supposed to make us laugh. The 1986 novel It by Stephen King, followed by the 1990 miniseries, started a spark that evolved clowns into a creation of horror. But is fear of clowns truly a real thing? Coulrophobia. By definition, an irrational fear of clowns is known as coulrophobia, with the prefix "kauro" coming from the ancient Greek word for one who goes on stilts. Symptoms of coulrophobia can include sweating, nausea, feelings of dread, fast heartbeat, crying or screaming, and anger being placed in a situation where a clown is present. There are many reasons why people are afraid of clowns. For instance, the painted smile. It is unnatural and hides any real human emotion that may be lying underneath. Clowns are difficult to categorize, therefore making them unknowable and creepy. It is hard to sympathize with clowns because they tend to make a fool out of themselves or others for entertainment, usually creating an inferiority-superiority complex. In a normal, happy adult, this creates a level of discomfort rather than entertainment. Clowns are also a typical example for the uncanny, which, defined by Freud, is the class of frightening things that lead us back to what is known and familiar. Harvard professor Stephen C. Schlossman elaborates on the uncanny theory in comparison to clowns. He explains that a clown has similar features to a human being: a mouth, a nose, ears, hands, feet, and hair. However, a clown's body parts are enlarged or exaggerated: giant shoes, abnormally large lips painted on a white face, and a huge red nose. But why do we enjoy watching movies with such creepy, unnatural protagonists? Why do we love watching horror films? According to a 2004 paper in the Journal of Media Psychology by Dr. Glenn Walters, the three primary factors that make horror films alluring are tension, generated by suspense, mystery, terror, shock, and gore; relevance, that may relate to personal relevance, cultural meaningfulness, the fear of death, etc. And, somewhat paradoxically given the second factor, unrealism. When looking at how clowns have been incorporated into horror films, this makes sense. When watching Stephen King's It, the killer clown is horrifying, but also still human-like, even though he's a demon that takes the shape of a clown. Not only is he human-like, but he also has a relevance in society because of the famous serial killer John Wayne Gacy, the American killer clown who murdered at least 33 young males and found guilty in 1980, 10 years before the release of the 1990 It miniseries. Roughly 27 years later, Pennywise returned to the screen in the 2017 remake of It. Again, the fear of clowns was still present and relevant in society in 2016, when the phenomenon of people dressing as clowns and carrying weapons to scare passers-by successfully created a common feeling of uneasiness within society. Also, the hit TV series American Horror Story also used clowns as a big theme in 2 of its seasons, installing an even greater sense of fear towards clowns within its viewers. With newer techniques and a different approach and the help of American pop culture, the fear of clowns was very much kept alive. In our video essay, we tried to establish a more profound connection between the original 1990s TV series and its 2017 remake, and investigate the typical horror genre techniques both movies used, or didn't use, to create an eerie and unsettling feeling to scare their audiences. The 2017 remake of the original It miniseries had to meet a certain level of expectations. After the huge success of the 1990 version, the acknowledgement of the term coulrophobia, and the killer clown hysteria, the movie was eagerly expected, not only by Stephen King's keenest fans, but the vast audience. The movie received mostly positive critique due to the cast's brilliant performance and the nostalgic 80s vibe. It follows the story of a couple of small-town children, almost teenagers, and their daily struggle with school, abusive parents, and most notably the presence of the supernatural. The plot begins with a vicious attack on a little boy named Georgie, later on presumed missing. His older brother Bill cannot cope with the loss and refuses to believe that he's dead. Later on, Bill starts noticing peculiar things, but apparently he's not the only one. On various occasions, all his friends have faced the terrifying clown Pennywise, and soon they are forced to face the harsh reality of their town's mystery. Pennywise unveils his demonic nature, becoming the embodiment of horror in its purest form, or rather forms. Let's take a look at Georgie's death scene. Right in the establishing shot, the difference in light, tone, and music is clearly visible. The 90s miniseries starts Georgie's scene, as we call it, with a rainy yet bright day. The music is playful, only slightly shifting towards a more dramatic tone. Georgie sings joyfully, while he watches the paper boat drift down the street into a drain. Pennywise pops up, and there is unsettling circus music creating a truly uncanny mood. There he sits in the drain, holding up the boat with a cheerful comic expression on his face that is rendered in a typical clown fashion by the makeup. The whole conversation between Georgie and Pennywise is filmed in tight frame, used for close-up shots. It continues in a playful, friendly manner, which is rendered highly ambiguous by the circus music. The miniseries version is especially creepy because of its use of medial, dramatic irony. For the viewer, Pennywise seems highly suspicious and the scene extremely eerie, whereas the characters do not share this tension. For Georgie and Pennywise, it seems to have more the feeling of a casual conversation. This effect is especially ambiguous, as power relations are reversed with Pennywise being positioned lower. Again, this pretension of inferiority is a classic clown trait. Until Pennywise shows his real face, his demonic nature and razor-sharp teeth, and attacks Georgie. We would also argue that contrary to the often exercised trend of using gruesome imagery for effect, the scene is quite effective by leaving the details of Georgie's fate to the viewer's imagination. The new version is quite different in many respects. The Georgie scene serves as the opening scene of the movie and starts with a top-angle shot that shows the topographic location of the following scene. The tone is darker, the music is a similar piece, but one that builds up much faster and much more dramatic. The waiting Pennywise in the drain carries its demonic origin proudly on its sleeve. It is right away decisively foregrounded by the change in Pennywise's eye color from luminescent orange to blue, that we are not dealing with a mortal clown. Unlike the old version where the whole face of Pennywise is clearly visible, the remake relies on the typical uplighting horror movie technique, which creates an extreme focus on its sharp teeth. Georgie seems to feel the thick, dark atmosphere of this supposed clown, just like us. Hardly any dramatic irony here. The conversation is tense. His fear is visibly inscribed in Georgie's face. The scene is also considerably longer. Counting from the moment Georgie leaves the house, it is about 4 minutes long, compared to the 2 minutes of the miniseries scene. Interestingly, both scenes are cut in a fairly similar tempo, with about 20 cuts per minute in the new scene and roughly 15 cuts per minute in the miniseries scene. These cuts are true to the original in that they are still applied mostly to character switches. The end of this scene gives us furthermore a strong glimpse on one of the major differences between those two productions. Typical to a modern horror movie, Pennywise's face is contorted with use of CGI, and he bites off George's arm in jump-scarish and exceedingly gruesome manner. We would, however, argue that the gore is very much on point. The short glimpse that we get on George's severed arm and the puddle of blood that closes the scene make it a perfect synopsis in terms of the film's atmosphere and style. Another great example is the projector photo book scene, where the kids learn about Pennywise's sinister origin. This scene is much more differently realized in the new It movie. Only the core idea remains intact. In the old version, the children skip through the photo book until they find this animated picture out of which Pennywise makes his scary entrance. Again, Pennywise pops up accompanied by his trademark sinister circus theme. Once again, this scene relies on the uncanny, as Pennywise transgresses from typical clown behavior to threatening to kill the kids. The camera perspective switches from point of view shots to long and medium shots. Another important technique is that the color switches from natural to black and white and back. The place is well lit and all of it happens in broad daylight, in open space. Here the focus of the scariness is placed on the sheer possibility of Pennywise grabbing one of the kids from out of the photo album. This is a typical technique of fluctuating mise-en-scene as the focus switches between reality and the book coming to life. This action contrasts sharply with the open space that is employed in this scene. We would argue that the movie in general establishes a sense of psychological creepiness as the kids slowly realize that there is nowhere to hide from Pennywise. The modern version of this scene is a great example for contemporary horror movies. The projector that is employed instead of the photo collection is placed in a dark room confined space. The projector goes crazy as soon as Pennywise appears. The light flickers. Ominous sounds are employed to build tension, which is a commonly used technique. An area of fast cuts are employed and Pennywise enters the room, armed with a monstrous set of teeth, in a low-angle shot. This transforms in a fast-paced, tumultuous scene in which the kids have nowhere to run until they let the light in. In comparison to the original scene, the fear in this version is much more physical, more claustrophobic than purely psychological. This is due to the massive portrayal of Pennywise taking up all the space. There's simply no room to evade the massive demonic figure. Yet, the most significant feature of this scene is its audiovisual build-up. When Pennywise takes control of the projector, the tension increases tremendously, both because of the rapid clicking of the projector and the alternation between light and darkness. However, halfway through the scene, the projector is slammed to the ground, slowing down the action. It is here when the projector starts in natural unison with the cuts to alternate darkness and light once again, yet much more slowly than the beforehand established tension is evoked even more dramatically, as it is clear that the spine-chilling climax of the scene is about to unfold in an intense jump scare. Those two scenes are just an example of the sheer massive amount of techniques that have been used in these movies. Especially, the new movie makes use of the majority of recognizable horror movie techniques, such as saturated red, the usage of negative space, rapid color changes, and irregular movement. To conclude, there is no ancient fear of clowns, but the mass hysteria of clowns has been growing to be a more widely discussed topic in recent years more than ever. It has a lot to do with Stephen King's portrayal of clowns and their twisted side, presented in many horror movies. We would argue that indeed both movies manage to present the King's narrative in a truly frightening manner. However, they do so in considerably different ways. The miniseries is, due to its age, much more simplistic in terms of camera or production techniques and computer effects, yet it also employs a more evenly flowing constant horror. Pennywise seems much more like a madman hunting the kids constantly in the real world by smoothly fading in and out of the picture. Combined with the lack of physical violence carried out by it, the miniseries also seems to give more importance to the psychological dimension of Pennywise's existence. In contrast, the 2017 It movie relies much more heavily on CGI, sound design, and state-of-the-art camera techniques. Pennywise scenes are also much more separated from the rest of the narrative. As with many contemporary horror movies, there is a slightly artificial break between the peaceful and the frightening scenes, especially as they are introduced through clever sound design and jump scares. Still, through a mixture of well-applied modern horror production techniques and reoccurring yet not creatively confining adherence to the source material, It 2017 brings the uncanny potential of the clown to its frightening potential.